Welcome to the Neijiaquan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. This week we continue to discuss the life of Liu Chieh. We talk about his meditation, what Bruce refers to as the water tradition of meditation. We talk about how that differs from the fire tradition a little bit. Then we finish the chapter on the first swing. We talk about the central core energy, and then we begin the chapter on the second swing. Get into the beginnings of how to turn from the weighted leg. We recorded this one live together in my backyard, so the audio is a little bit fuzzy, but we got to be in person, so that was cool. Also, the second half of our interview with Lee Berkins is finally out on the Patreon, so if you have heard the first half and want to hear the second half, that's available. Okay, enjoy the episode, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Neijiaquan podcast with Isaac and Jess. We're continuing our discussion of the seminal Qigong book, Opening the Energy Gates of Your Body by B.K. Francis, where we've been going chapter by chapter and exploring all the different teachings and history contained within. And we're continuing our discussion of the life of Liu Chieh, the author's teacher in Beijing, China in the 1980s. And so we've been digging through different sources to try and find more about Liu Chieh's life. He's a very mysterious figure. There's not much known about him. So we've dug through different articles and little bits and pieces from different books, trying to sort of explore his character a little bit more. So we're going to pull some things from an article from Chieh magazine way back in the day, 1993, I think. Kumar Francis, an informal discussion on Taoist meditation, part 1. So we begin with the author's experience. Kumar writes, during my earlier years in Taiwan and Hong Kong, I trained in Taoism for about 7.5 years. This is where I did much of the energy work and a majority of meditation work. I was fortunate to have been trained as a Taoist priest, Daoshi, during these years. I don't talk about this very often, but I was a fully empowered Taoist priest. I did all the things that you do with these types of practices and some of the subsidiary things. I learned arts like exorcism, sending people off when they die, empowerment, charging spaces, providing helpful events for people and things of that nature. This was my preparation for studying with my main teacher, Liu Chieh, in Beijing. This is where I learned the real tradition. His tradition is that of Lao Tzu. So that sort of gives the background of B.K. Francis talking about his teacher and the meditation work they did together. So this paragraph talking about his training in Taoism during his years in Taiwan and Hong Kong sort of lay the groundwork for when he meets this sort of Grand Master who takes him into the further depths, including all the way to the very original source, Lao Tzu, which is the most famous name in Taoism. I think it's one of the things that sets this style and this set Opening the Energy Gates apart from a lot of the martial arts I've learned over the years, where there's a real emphasis on this coming from the roots of a Taoist tradition in China. You know, that's really a strong statement to make, and I think it's a pretty cool thing. It's what makes this perspective special.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce always said it was a, Taoist. It's in the title of the book, right? Taoist energy enhancement. So it really had, its roots in Taoist practices, and he always emphasized that there were Buddhist practices and there were other types of practices, but that this one was a particularly Taoist in nature.
Yeah, I've always liked that side of it because I was a religious studies major, and I've always been interested in traditional esoteric practices, especially East Asia has some of the best. So when I saw Taoism was involved, I'm like, I got to check this out. And as I got into it, it wasn't as mysterious as I thought. It's more about becoming aware of how your mind and body works as you train. It's not quite as mystical as maybe I started out thinking. But that side of it, I don't know, it just appeals to me. It's like, I like that Taoist side of things,
I was always attracted to the combination, right? That it was both the, meditation, mind stuff from Taoism and the body stuff all kind of wrapped into one.
So he goes on to talk about how Liu taught Taoist meditation. The Taoist meditation Liu taught me is primarily the classical method of Lao Tzu. The method that we seek does not really use fire. Instead, we end up finding the light inside of water. And he often emphasizes how you're supposed to do everything in a relaxed, continuous, smooth way, following that example of water that's found in the Tao Te Ching so many times as this reference to water being sort of the symbol or the metaphor of how you go about your training.
Yeah, I mean, he alludes to the light, right? So there's this idea in Taoist meditation of an inner light and inner sound. And so that's a big part of the training, is trying to find that and work with that. So in fire traditions, the main practice is the microcosmic orbit, moving energy up the back and down the front. Where in the water tradition that Bruce teaches, it's the dissolving practice, and doing the microcosmic orbit comes later. So the idea is that you start with this purely downward sort of letting go water element type of action, and then you do the other stuff on top of it, as opposed to starting from a more, as he puts it, fire element practice.
So there's another paragraph that comes after that I found really interesting. Liu Hongzhi was very famous for being a martial artist, but he also happened to be a patriarch of a northern sect of Taoism. He was a lineage holder. He was, quote, the man, as the expression goes. His job was not to teach. He was responsible for duties in the lineage other than teaching. In China, he was what is called one of the three guardians of the empire, which I haven't heard much about this, but it sounds like Master Liu he wasn't at that teacher level. He was some sort of really high on the administration level of this particular sect.
Yeah, I mean, this is all hearsay because I don't even remember who I heard it from, but that the three guardians, but that they each had this role in, like, okay, your job is to meditate on this and work on that element of the Tao. So I think it was something like that Leo's had this particular role in this sect, but he never really specified what sect it was.
Right. And I mean, to me, that speaks to sort of the secret society things that go on in Chinese culture that you read about, especially in the old days of clan organizations, trade organizations, spiritual organizations. There's all types of different side groups in the way their society is constructed in the old days. So that sort of sounds like that to me. So here's another one we've come across before. He says, I was very lucky to have studied with him. This was not through any good auspices of my own, frankly speaking, but because he had a dream about me before I came. I happen to have been only one of 2 students that he taught in depth since the 1949 communist ascension. In fact, all that I know is that he dreamed about me coming, and that is the only reason he taught me. There's that prophetic dream thing again that came up, which sounds like, this guy sounds like a real mystic.
I mean, yeah, we can't argue with a prophetic dream, I guess.
Right. So one more thing he speaks of here during his experience with Liu. Almost a year before he died, he began to constantly encourage me to teach about Taoism when I returned to the West. At first, I felt uncomfortable with the prospect of teaching. I didn't feel comfortable doing it. But during that last year he was alive, he said, if you're willing, do it. If not, don't bother. It has only been since 1992 that I started teaching Taoism publicly at all. So that's, that's an interesting thing about, Master Liu Hongzhi saw a vision of some of this Taoist stuff coming to the West and being useful in some way.
Yeah, I remember when he first started teaching meditation as a separate subject, in a sense. I mean, I think he'd done stuff in Denver, but that was more sort of by invitation only, and for a very small group. When he started teaching larger, like retreats on Taoist meditation.
Official meditation retreats, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think the first time I did a Taoist meditation retreat was 94 or 95, somewhere in there. And it was very different than what he does now, for sure.
So he says he started in 92. When did you come on board?
I started in 92, but I didn't do any of the quote unquote meditation stuff for the first couple of years.
Uh-huh.
I was more just doing the energy gates.
I always wanted to do martial arts at first. I was like, why does he keep teaching Qigong and meditation classes? So I would always just do the martial arts week. But over time, we kept running across it, and he kept showing us different parts of it that I definitely found interesting. Yeah, it's hard training.
he taught a Taoist, Tai Chi is Taoist meditation week long thing in Ammill Ranch, and that was the first time I did meditation for more than a day.
Yeah. Is that fun, or is
Yeah,
that
it was
demanding?
cool. I mean, no, it was way over my head at the time, so a lot of the stuff didn't really mean anything for a decade or so. But yeah, it was great.
So this article goes deep into all kinds of different Taoist stuff. So we're just focusing on the bits and pieces that talk about Liu Hongzhi and his approach to life. But he does mention a few things that I wanted to bring out. My teacher, Liu Hongzhi, was a water method person. That's all I practice. That's all I do. Having done the fire method for many years, and in my younger years, having practiced both the Tantric tradition and the Kundalini tradition in India, I reached a point where personally the fire tradition no longer cut it. I was not particularly looking for the water tradition. It found me. There was no intent on my part. I was originally in Taiwan and Hong Kong, where it is very hard to find the water tradition. Most Taoists are just independent and prone to being who and where you might least expect to find them. The water method of Taoism begins from a very simple premise. It is that a human being has a mind, that for whatever reason you have a certain degree of control over your destiny. I didn't say all of it, but you have some things you can do. I like that quote because it speaks a little bit to how in his teachings there's a sense that cosmic events sort of wash through the universe bouncing around, and us human beings feel those waves too. And when those waves pass through the world, you can sort of surf them in different ways. So you can try to resist the wave, or you can try to burn through the wave, you can try to ride the wave, but life just keeps hitting you, and you can't change your destiny a lot, but you can change how you respond to the things that happen to you, I think is how I interpret that.
Yeah, it's you can take the concept of karma, right? That in Taoism you have a mind that gives you some influence on your karma, right? So you don't have total control over it by any means, but you can influence it a little bit, and before you get to the level of influencing it, you just have to learn to ride with it. It's the old cliche of ride the wave, or life is like a river, all those sorts of things. And
Totally.
there's obviously some truth to those statements because
Yeah.
they've made it into almost every tradition out
Right.
there. But I think the emphasis on that as a physical practice is what makes this stuff like a little bit more.
So you're embodying it, you're feeling it, you're experiencing that watery flow, not just as an intellectual idea, but through your physical body.
So even in the meditation tradition, even though it's a not physical activity, you're not moving, your body is still engaged, and the sensations of your body is still a big part of what you're using to access these deeper levels. So I think it sort of spills over into the other aspects of the practice.
Moving on to the next section of the instructional portion of the book, we end the chapter about the first swing with a discussion of the core energy. There is a line of energy that runs vertically directly through the center of the body. It goes from the center of the head right down through the perineum and continues through the center of the bone marrow of the arms and legs. This central vertical core of energy is the original energetic source of the formation of the human body from conception onward, manifesting in the development of the spine, the arms, and the legs. So he calls it the central vertical core of energy, which describes a sort of a straw or a tube of energy that's going down the center of your body, which is normally we call it the central channel, which is a shortening of this word, the central vertical core of energy. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that description because that's describing what it actually feels like a little more than what's a channel feel like. But it's this is one of those principles that's in all internal martial arts, where you have this core, and once you're sort of linked into that core, all your movement comes from there. And there are a lot of different terms for it. In Tai Chi, it's usually the Zhong Ding, right?
Right. We talked about Bob's description of that. Yeah.
Bruce tends to use the term Zheng Qi, right? So this central Qi, which is what runs through the channel. But essentially, it's just a connection to, this thing that that's running through your body. I mean, this is.
Well, he says it's from where conception begins. Like your formation. This is the energy pattern that creates the limbs and the arms that grow away from the center.
Right. So there's the central channel. Then there's the Ren and the Du, which is the ones sort of in front and back of the central channel, and then there's the left and right channels. And so the stuff that Bruce does focuses primarily on beginning with the central channel. So it's I think a lot of this stuff it's not so much that they do different things. It's that it's where you start and what the emphasis is, and eventually they all kind of reach the same place, but where you start on the merry-go-round is kind of that changes.
So it reminds me, all martial arts have the center line, which is where the other person's, center up and down, the vertical center of their body that you're sort of aiming to try and hit. That way, if you miss, you hit, off to the side a little bit. His central energy core is more like inside, not the front of the skin of the body, but the very inside, running down even in front of the spine. So the actual physical central core of the body, the way he describes it here makes me think of it's a thicker or thinner core depending on your ability to sort of feel it. But it's all it's a conceptual area inside your body. There's energy just rushing through this area it's not a physical space.
Yeah, I mean, the center line would be the physical space, right? I mean, or the spine is the closest thing you can line up with it. That's, one solid piece. But yeah, essentially it's a non-physical thing that runs through your body. And, this is where like all of this stuff, in the beginning, you just have to say, okay, well, I accept this premise, that this is how it works. And once you accept the premise, then there are these parameters, and you're working within these parameters because you accept the premise that Qi exists and that it runs through channels inside your body. I mean, if you don't believe that, then talking about how it runs through those channels is kind of irrelevant. But, this is a method of meditation that focuses primarily on working with the central channel as the initial practice.
So it's almost like once you do the swings and the standing a little bit, you feel your hands, you feel your arms, then you feel your way towards the inner parts of your body, and then the sort of next level would be to feel the actual core itself independently.
Yeah. The way Bruce put it was that, you can't really get to the central core if you haven't gone through the outer stuff yet. Right. So the left and right stuff comes first. Then once that's opened up, you have access to the central channel.
It's almost like you feel your way in, and then from there, that he describes it as, it's important that you move and turn equally from both the lower dantian and the central core simultaneously, and that this creates the largest output of energy for all the systems of the body. So like you feel your way in, but from then on, you use the inside to influence the outside. I think you go in and then you come back out. It's how I'm sort of looking at it.
Yeah, and it's different when you move from the central core versus when you move from the, like, for example, if you move from your hips, which is the left and right channel, it looks different a little bit, and it definitely feels different than when you turn from the central, that center axis. And so, like I said, this is a huge thing in Tai Chi. Also Bagua, also Xingyi, where you get that you're not turning from your outer sort of structure, but that it's connected to this thing inside of you.
So moving on to chapter 8, we'll begin look at the second swing. He begins by saying the second swing strengthens the liver and spleen. So how do you interpret that? The liver and spleen are these visceral organs kind of on the sides of your mid-body.
Well, we talked a little bit about with that the swings act as this internal massage mechanism, right? You're massaging your internal organs by twisting and the gentle tapping and all of that stuff. So what the different swings do is the first swing starts with the lower internal organs. So
your
kidneys, your stomach, your digestive stuff. And then as you move into the second swing, now you get to the liver and the spleen. And then the third swing is the heart and the lungs. And so I kind of think of it as you're squeezing the toothpaste tube up a little higher, you get, and as you just get access to a different chunk.
So it's like the level that your hands tap on your body is the level that it's affecting the most.
Yeah, we talked about the 3 burners, right? There's the lower, the middle, the upper. Each swing is targeting a different burner, essentially. So the first swing targets the lower burner. The second swing is this middle one, which is everything sort of from, your belly button to your sternum, basically.
So he says here, the challenge is to shift your weight and turn the quad at the same time. He says, the base of all corrected movement in internal martial arts involves physically and energetically joining the leg and waist together as the body shifts weight. So that can be turning and twisting, it could be striking, whatever. So far you've worked with the turning the quad and you've shifted the weight. Now you're really combining those two together as the footwork demands that now you lift your foot and turn.
Yeah, and there's that third chunk, which is turning from your core, right? So the physical stuff with your hips and your legs that's like the propeller. That's the thing that moves you. And then inside of that, you have the barber pole thing that turns a little bit. So the challenge with the second swing really for most people is that turning the hip in that direction is just much harder than turning it in the other direction. So keeping your weight on your foot and turning away from that leg just puts pressure on your knee in a way that most people have a lot of.
Right. That's right. What's the next thing he says is you're trying to expand from and sink into the inguinal cut, the quad, while not twisting from the knee, which can, cause damage to your body. So once again, the emphasis is on really keeping the knee stable and moving from the quad area.
Yeah, and this one, this is where having a visceral sense of the leg you're standing on staying still as opposed to twisting inward and collapsing your knee or your pelvis when you turn in the other direction. So that counter twist has to be in place to hold your leg stable.
I mean, in our class in the old days, I'd lay on the ground and hold the person's knee pretty much in place so that they get this, everyone over and over, just to keep that sense of stabilizing the leg as you open the quad away from you. It takes quite a bit of practice.
Yeah, it has to. A lot of really small muscles in your hips have to stretch out in a way that is surprisingly difficult.
Yeah, you're right. It's not so much the strength as the ability to be flexible and relax a little bit so you can open your leg. It's not that your legs aren't strong enough. It's that they're too bound up to really stretch open. So this one works that, over time, the second swing will help with that.
Yeah, I would say that the first swing, cloud hands in the first swing, ideally have given you the strength to stand on one leg and to turn in the direction of that leg. This is going the next step, which is turning the opposite direction. So it's much easier if you're like in a bow stance, like in a forward Tai Chi stance or something, to turn in the other direction because that leg is behind you. But this thing of keeping that leg sort of in front of you as you turn and open from your hip. Most people initially what they want to do is twist the foot, right? So Bruce has this thing of, your knee, your foot, your belly button, your nose all have to face the same direction. And your back knee faces, straight ahead. So the back knee doesn't move and everything else turns to 45 degrees or wherever you're going to go.
So he starts the instructions for this second swing by doing your feet parallel, shift weight 100%. So you just return to that idea of just completely shifting all the way from one side all the way to the other. And he, again, just like you just said, the 4 points of the shoulders, nest, quad, and groin should all point in the same direction, straight ahead. So that's to train the post leg by shifting onto it 100, shifting onto it 100. And I remember we would always, can you lift your empty leg slightly without losing your balance? That's the ultimate test.
Right, because you can do cloud hands and you can do the first swing without actually shifting your weight 100%, because you don't have to pick up your unweighted foot. But with the second swing, you actually have to make that jump of actually being able to lift your foot off the ground and turn at the same time. So
Right.
it's these two components. So I'm sure he breaks it down, and you pick your foot up first, and then you turn your body, then you put your foot down, then you pick your foot up, then you turn your body back to the front. And it's just this sort of grueling process of training that area inside your hip to do a movement that it's not used to doing.
It's not a quick process. And I remember over the years working on it, how the first movement of single palm change in Bagua, this is the exact same step. When you want to do Pitren and Xingyi, this is that same ability to stand on one leg and let the other leg be free. And it's a lot harder than it looks like at first. You realize, wow, I'm really cheating a lot of the time while I lose my balance and sort of lurch into it rather than truly lifting my leg with 100% weight and stepping lightly with the other one is very profound.
Yeah, like I said, the thing is, you can, if your leg muscles are strong enough, you can cheat and you can sort of just twist your leg muscles. Problem with that is if you twist them too much, you damage your joints or worse. So the thing of getting it where you don't use the big leg muscles to twist your body, but you actually just isolate that stuff in your hip and your leg muscles are relaxed is the real challenge of the second swing, and a lot of other things too. But like you said, it's the same thing you do in Bagua. It's the same thing in Tai Chi, for example. If you're doing a movement where you're stepping 90 degrees to the side.
Yeah, say like cloud hands, stepping in Tai Chi. You need to reach out with that leg.
The transition from brush knee into brush knee, when you do that 90-degree turn, that type of movement, if you can do that from opening your hip, one, it's a lot stronger, and two, it doesn't damage your joints.
So the next instruction is, as the body turns, hip and foot pivot as one unit. That's what you were just saying. One leg's the post leg. All the other action takes place once one side's planted in place. The hip, foot, body pivot as one unit.
The only thing that's moving is the weighted, the inguinal fold on the weighted side. Everything else is basically static. Now, there's things you have to do to keep those other parts static, right? There's all the little alignments and stuff. But basically, the only thing that you're really moving is that one hip. Everything else is staying pretty much relative to the body, staying still.
And I remember watching his first video he put out about this, where, man, he would swing way back each time with a huge step. And his body was just like this tidal wave, just this whipping loose energy that would instantly fling back the other direction, just like you're throwing a frisbee, but like the weight just continues to swing. And as I trained, I started on a little smaller than that. This one, you don't want to go too far.
Yeah, those old videos, he was turning to almost 90 degrees, which for, the purposes of doing energy gates, you only need to go about 45 degrees max. That anything beyond 45 degrees is just to loosen things up. But again, this is where we go back to the 70% rule, and that if you can turn to 45 degrees comfortably, that means you stop at 30. If you can turn to 70 degrees comfortably, you can stop at 60, and you just have to be careful about not going past your capacity. And this is the, in terms of risk factor, right? This is the movement that most people hurt their joints with. Not necessarily in something like this, but it's that where the one leg stays still, and as the body turns away from that leg, the joint takes the the knee
Force.
joint twists and it goes in the wrong way, and that
Right.
and so the whole thing with this is learning how to make that sort of fanning motion or swinging motion with your unweighted side by using the weighted side.
And this one, you got to go slow, take your time. I mean, if you want to try whipping around once in a while, go for it just to get the feel of it. But for this one, I found I had to repeat it many times and feel frustrated many times before it really started to click. And the one key thing that kept coming back, make it smaller, make it smaller. Just keep retreating until you really feel super confident. And then so you can do this without hurting yourself at all before you make it bigger. Then do that until you don't hurt yourself at all. Because I made the mistake of, I can kind of do it, now I'll do it bigger. I can kind of do it, I'll make it even bigger. But I didn't really stabilize the smallest level first. And it's like building Lego blocks. You really in the long run, take the time to just do 10 of these on each side, then later do 10 more on each side, and just, it's short reps, but do it frequently. It'll eventually come to you.
Yeah, and the way when you're practicing by yourself, the two things you have to watch for are your knee doesn't, the weighted knee, doesn't collapse inward, but almost more importantly for stabilizing your weight, it's that your weighted hip doesn't swing out to the side, sort of like a rocket or something, where as you turn to the left, your right hip doesn't swing or move forward. And this is a crucial piece, because if that hip moves forward as you're turning to the side, all the pressure goes forward in your knee on the on the patella, which is not where you want the pressure in the knee. So that's one of those things where if you hold those two places still, and this is what you would do in a class, right? You'd have one person hold your hip and the other hold on the outside, and then hold your knee on the inside, and then you would turn away from that leg. And most people, when you have somebody holding those 2 points, it's hard to turn 20 degrees,
right?
Let alone 45
Movement's
degrees.
way limited.
I mean, it took me years to be able to get with somebody holding it to actually go to 45. Now, didn't take me years to go to 45 without somebody holding it, but that's one of these things where, your own perception of feeling of it may not be accurate. So having you can use a chair also. I mean, there are ways of doing it without another person, but the ideal is to just have somebody hold, like I said, hold your hip and hold your knee and try to swing, that way, and just see if, you're successful or not.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on here is something that's important. The unweighted foot physically lifts an inch or two off the ground when you begin your turn, and the ball of your foot sets down on the ground at the end of your turning arc. Now, sometimes I remember sort of being sloppy with it and just sort of lifting and stomping with my foot or whatever. But over time, you helped me get to more where you deliberately place that ball of the foot on the ground. And then when you lift it back up, there's almost a little bit of a bounce as you lift up and then stand back to neutral. Then you turn and press that ball slightly into the ground. Even with zero weight, you make it a very deliberate touching of the ground.
Yeah, it's the same kind of contact you make with your hand against your body, right? It's this sort of heavy, but relaxed,
but not forceful. But heavy.
It's like that feeling if you just drop your hand on your leg. If you drop your foot on the ground, it's sort of the same thing, and it creates this bit of a spring back. So the idea is that when that leg hits the ground, it's acting as it absorbs the shock and then springs back. So it's acting like a shock absorber in a car, where none of that pressure comes back up into your joint. It all just gets recycled and used to swing you back in the other direction. All right, good talking to you.
Good talking to you, bro.
Nice to do it in person again.
No doubt.
All right. Hey, it's Isaac again. Nothing big to announce. Just want to say Happy New Year to everybody, and thanks again for listening, supporting us, and hope you're doing well, and take care.